Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt from Ratho Quarter, and this is the second installment in my desktop confessional series. Today, I'd like to talk about the process of making this bass tone from my previous video. So let's jump into Studio One and take a look. This is gonna make it sound horrible. All hail the algorithm. Like, subscribe. All hail. Okay, so here we are in Studio One to take a look at how I put this bass tone together from my previous video. It's really important to say I'm absolutely not an expert at this kind of work at all, but I definitely, given the video I was making was basically a review of some upgrades that I did to my bass guitar, I felt like it was important that the effort I put into the bass tone was a little bit more than perhaps what I would normally put in. I do tend to use the system of like two identical bass signals, and you can see that's what I've got here. I've literally got two identical bass signals, and then you process each of those differently. So one is like your kind of like low passed, compressed, clean tone, and the other one is your high passed, distorted, gritty tone that takes care of your mids and upper mids. So what I'm going to do is we can have a very quick listen to that bass guitar tone right now, along with the drums. Okay, so that's kind of the finished bass tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off all of the plugins involved in making that tone, and we'll step through them one by one, and you can see the process. Okay, so now this is the raw DR tone coming into the audio interface, soloed out on its own, so no drums. I was playing through a compression pedal just before it hit the audio interface, but otherwise this is just the bass guitar as it is. And then the first thing I've added is this TSE Audio BOD SansAmp kind of emulator thing. And to be completely honest, I didn't pay an awful lot of attention to all of these settings. I probably pushed the level a little bit and pushed the drive a bit, and then maybe kind of like, maybe emphasize the highs a little bit more. But you'll see that immediately this kind of makes a huge difference to the tone. So like straight away that gives you like a pretty usable tone, I would say. You could probably tool around with some of these controls a little bit more and get yourself something that really works in the mix without too much more effort than that. So this is basically me designing the kind of lower, cleaner tone. It still has a little bit of drive and a little bit of growl in it, but to be honest, it was kind of a stream of consciousness bass tone design for this particular one. So next in the chain, I've got a FabFilter compressor where I have literally just used Punchy Bass Guitar preset. It's literally one of their presets, and then I've adjusted the threshold to taste. So I think that is super subtle, but it does feel like it squashes things a little bit more. Perhaps like the feeling of more sustain, and like maybe the kind of front end attack is just controlled a little bit more, but it is really subtle. And then this is, it's not doing an awful lot, but this is effectively my low passing. So for example, this is just like this is the user interface of the Parallax bass processing plugin, where obviously you can kind of separate it out into different bands and process the different bands individually. There seems to be a low, mid, and a high. So basically what we're doing with that FabFilter is probably something like that. We're just kind of isolating all of that content, and we're going to deal with that content with another bass signal. So that effectively is my kind of low, clean bass tone. So let's just listen to that in context. So I probably could have gotten rid of more of the high end in that particular tone, but it seemed to work as it was. So let's take a quick look at the high distorted bass tone now. Once again, that's just the bass DR signal. So here we're getting rid of a lot of the low end content. And once again, I've not gotten rid of very much, so I'm not really sure what my thinking was here, but we're generating this portion of the bass signal now. So we're probably doubling up a bit on the mid-range, and I think you'll probably see later in the video, I do take a step to try and get rid of some of that excessive mid-range. But this is the first step in this kind of part of the bass tone. So let's just have a quick listen. So you can hear that gets rid of like a ton of low end, and it just becomes this like more upper mid clanky kind of sound. And then we're going to go back to my old tricks, which is just using one of the EasyMix presets. And here I've used the this is the kind of Frederick from Meshuggah add-on to the EasyMix plugin, and this is his bass high mix preset. This is going to make it sound horrible, but probably the right kind of horrible once it's all blended together. Yeah, you get the idea. And to be honest, you don't need to, I mean, you could run this through like a guitar amp or like one of the Archetype plugins, or just even one of the stock guitar amps in whatever your DAW is, just as long as you get this kind of gritty upper mid distorted tone, it'll kind of do the job. It helps to have the character of this tone marry nicely with the character of the low clean bass tone, but ultimately what you're trying to do is just make it distorted and ugly and dirty. And then a close friend of mine who's way more of an expert at this sort of music production than I am, he recently suggested that I could probably do with a little bit more air and maybe excitement and top end in some of my mixes. So I took his words to heart and found this Slate Digital plugin called Fresh Air, which is actually really cool. It's super simple, like two knobs basically, controlling a kind of mid air and a high air. And in this case, because I wanted the bass guitar to be kind of have like the most personality in the mix and it be the most present in the mix and announce itself, I basically elected to add this plugin to the bass tone. So you can hopefully hear what this is doing if we listen through it now. So you can hear, it's subtle, but you can hear it kind of adding a kind of upper mid additional kind of frequency and excitement there. And then obviously I've added a load of distortion to this bass guitar, so I thought it was pertinent to then add a noise gate to that. So like there's obviously quite a few stops in the bass part, so it seemed like a good idea to kind of cut out the silence when the bass wasn't playing. I'm pretty sure this EasyMix plugin here, I'm pretty sure behind the scenes here this has got a noise gate built into it, but just for safety I decided to add this kind of noise gate preset using the stock Studio One expander. And so you can see that at work there. And then finally I've got a kind of strange looking EQ curve here, where I'm doing a kind of like a bunch of notching and then this like big high shelf, just kind of boosting the top end. And I think this is doing quite a bit. I think it's probably just trying to emphasize, maybe get rid of a couple of frequencies I didn't really like, but mostly just trying to emphasize the kind of upper content of that part of the bass tone, just to like just really sculpt it and give the bass tone the sound I wanted. I spent a lot of time kind of like comparing what I was doing to a couple other bass tones that I really liked, and would occasionally just kind of dip in during the process of making it and throw an EQ on there and start trying to shape the tone when I felt like it wasn't matching to what I was hearing in the kind of reference sound, if that makes sense. So if we listen to both of those together now, so this is the low clean tone and the high distorted tone, it's probably not going to sound amazing, but it's probably kind of where I would have stopped. In fact, this is almost going further than I would have done with kind of previous bass tones. Yeah, so it's safe to say that doesn't sound amazing, but I probably would have, like in the past, I would have kind of taken this high distorted tone and kind of just like dialed it back a bit, just reduced the volume and blended it in a bit more subtly. But hopefully it will make sense shortly why I didn't need to do that in this case. And as you can see, both of these are then sent to the bass master bus, where I've got a pretty epic plug-in chain trying to do all the processing that I felt like I needed to do there. So let's have a look at the first one. And this is just a whole load of EQ, and it looks like there's a lot of kind of different things going on. But really, I think the most important parts of this is is kind of getting rid of some of the super low sub stuff here. And then most importantly, I think, is this mid cut. I think this really, aside from all of these tiny little additional bits, this thing is really what is changing the character of the sound. So let's play through it and you can hear the difference this makes. Yeah, I mean, for me, this EQ is making like a massive difference. Like, it becomes way darker and it just sounds cooler immediately, like gets rid of this kind of like horrible, loose, clangy, mid-range sound that just doesn't feel like it belongs in the tone at all. So kind of at this point, we're starting to head in the direction of the final bass tone. So next in the line, yet another compressor. This one is a sidechain compressor. So this one's listening to the snare master and the kick master, and that'll just be ducking the signal every time the compressor hears the snare and the kick drum. So pretty straightforward. You can see in that working quite well there. And then this is where like I really took a bit of a deviation from what I would normally do, and is basically using impulse responses. So I guess it's quite logical in a way. I've almost treated everything before this point, all the bass processing before this point, I've almost treated it as like preamp and pedals and like just everything that would come into, like just everything that comes into the amp before it goes out of a speaker. So in this particular instance, I've loaded up these two impulse responses, which are these like Own Hammer Ampeg impulse responses, and these have a kind of a huge impact on the sound. Yeah, so it rolls off the top end a lot and kind of like seems to squash everything and kind of make everything a little bit more like coherent and all like it kind of belongs together. Really kind of starts to get like a way cooler character and a cooler sound. So next in the chain, and obviously having made that move, I've kind of realized, right, we've lost a lot of the kind of aggressive top end, which you can hear. I mean, it's pleasantly so, I would say. But once again, kind of referring back to my producer buddy, I felt like I probably needed to introduce a little bit more air and excitement in there. So I've kind of brought this Slate Revival plugin, which I used to use loads back in the day, particularly on my mastering chain. And it's a free plugin. It's awesome, super simple, like just two knobs, basically thickness and shimmer. And then the shimmer knob will introduce a little bit more air and kind of top end to the additional top end harmonics to the sound. subtle, but you can kind of hear a little bit of it creeping in there. And then I've used this is a very affordable plugin called RBass, and it seems like it's used pretty commonly in these kinds of applications. This just adds like a nice kind of low sub to the bass. Yeah, you can hear a nice kind of like sub body that kind of like creeps in and like reinforces the overall tone. Really nice. Next in the list, a little bit more notching. I'm absolutely like not an expert at this kind of tone shaping at all, but I was really, in the case of this particular project, I was really doing my best to kind of listen as critically and analytically as I could to my bass tone, and then critically compare it against other bass tones. And I think I'm just really trying to pay attention to what I could hear. I tried to react as best as I could to some of those things, and I felt like in this instance I could feel, after I've added the impulse responses, that there were some annoying upper frequencies that got added. So let's just have a quick listen. Yeah, and you can really hear them at the kind of front end of the riff there. I guess it just makes it sound a little bit more darker and a little bit more kind of like the right sort of character that I was looking for. So next in the list, again, more EQ shaping. And I think this was kind of born out of me really like comparing the bass tone that I had with the bass tone that I was aspiring to have. And I realized I probably didn't have enough of the right kind of top end. So this is me just kind of boosting different parts of the signal to try and give it more of the character I was hoping for. Yeah, and I think you can hear there's like a little bit more presence, a little bit more sizzle to the tone. Kind of like it's got a lot of top end, but it still feels really dark and kind of sinister. So next in the chain, I obviously decided that this needed more compression still. So I've added a multi-band compressor. And I also obviously decided that it needed more of a top-end boost after impulse responses had their way with it. So you can see I'm using the FabFilter Pro MB, and I've kind of compressed the low end quite a lot and then compressed and boosted the top end. So let's listen to what that's doing. I think that does quite a bit, actually. It feels like it's it just feels like it's made the sound a little bit more balanced and kind of brought that kind of more aggressive personality just up front a little bit more. Yeah, it feels like it kind of balances the relationship between those two parts of the sound. And then absolutely last in the chain is basically just another EQ, which is doing absolutely nothing. I was using this and constantly looking at it as like a spectrum analyzer to kind of study the sound as best as I could, and help see what I needed to do to the signal to make it sound more the way I wanted it to. So once again, let's just listen to the final bass tone in context. Okay, I hope that was kind of like, I hope that was interesting, and hopefully that gave you a couple of ideas or things that you could maybe try on your own bass tone. This is definitely like a way more kind of involved process that I've taken before to make a bass tone. It's a bit absurd actually how many plugins I've got on there, but I really enjoyed the process and kind of am super happy with the result. So I think I'll definitely be experimenting more with this kind of stuff again in the future. Maybe not using this exact plugin chain, but definitely experimenting with these kind of principles. I think there's a lot of value in kind of maybe treating some of the processing here as like your pedals and your preamp tone, and then kind of once you get to the point where you're running it through some impulse responses, after that it's kind of like post-amp, post-cab processing. And I think that's a really kind of handy takeaway for me for this one, is that those impulse responses really added a nice kind of cohesion and dark character to the tone. So I will absolutely be using that again in the future. I hope that was helpful or interesting in some way. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to subscribe, as I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to comment below, as I really enjoy interacting with you in the comments section. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Smiley. That's an intense one, isn't it? There you go, that sounded manly.